Hi class, it's Bill Berry with another video in the Programming with Choices series. We're looking this week at selection and how you can use it to accomplish various scenarios. You can make your code take little detours to handle multiple scenarios. We have a couple of little catch-up or random topics to talk about real quick before we jump in and talk about something a little bit different. But let's catch up on those topics real quick and then we will move on to some more coding. So let's jump down to this slide. Let us look again at comparison and logical operators because now we actually need them. When we're writing if statements, we need these things. We talked about the fact that in parentheses you need to put a condition. Those conditions tend to use comparison operators and they will need logical operators in many cases. So let's take a look at those again so we can make sure that we're really clear on them. First, here are the comparison operators. They should look familiar. We talked about them before, but just to reiterate, make sure that you do not put any spaces between these things, right? If the symbol takes two symbols, right? If the idea takes two symbols, you got to put them right together. So that's the case here, 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 and here. The other thing to remember is that this is when you are comparing to see if two things are the same, you use two equal signs, right? So to compare equality, you use equal equal. Don't confuse that with the assignment operator, right? The assignment operator is a single equal sign. I'm sorry that they have the same, that they look a little bit the same, but we got to learn the difference between the two. So that's hard to spot in code, right? You'll see if you make that mistake in code, that's going to be a little bit hard to see. So don't confuse those two things. All right. The other one that we want to revisit is the logical operators. We talked about the fact that if you need to make more interesting compound or complex conditions, then you might want to use and or, and those use either two ampersands or two vertical bars. And again, don't put a space between them. They have to go right together. This one means and, this one means or. All right, so, and then you can also use not. We won't use that one as often, but that's something you can use. Now, a couple important things to know. I mentioned about the two symbols, but here's the other one. Please note this. Make a note of it physically or in your mind because this is a very, very common thing to do, especially for beginning programmers. You must make sure that if you use these logical operators, they must join conditions that are valid in and of themselves. You can't use partial conditions on the left and right of them. So while in English, this sounds fine, right? If age is less than 5 or greater than 65, that is not valid code. That's not the way that you need to construct these things. If they ever work, they're not going to work correctly. So you must realize that both conditions on the left of the operator, the logical operator, each one must be a valid condition in itself. So you have to restate the variable more often than you might expect. So this is valid if age is less than 5 or age is greater than 65. Notice age must be stated. The right way to think of it is cover up one, and this by itself must be a valid condition. Cover up this one. This by itself must be a valid condition. Super important, super easy to get wrong, and even working on the final exam, some of you will be struggling with this. So really be clear about this and flag this as something that you really need to pay attention to. Now, once we get that, we can start working through challenges that are more complex. For instance, here's a challenge that we'll work on in class, where we have more than one thing that we need to think about in the conditions, right? So that makes life a little bit interesting. So that's what we're going to talk about there. And so in class we'll do this challenge, and we'll also be able to do challenges that look like this, but we're not going to, not going to do that right here. Now, just to kind of summarize one other thing to be helpful, if you're trying to get a mental picture of this, you're trying to get your brain wrapped around your particular scenario, here are some things that you need to think about. First is, how many cases, right? Are there 2 different cases? Are there 3? Exactly how many scenarios are there? Because that makes a big difference. Usually, though, you need one less condition than you have cases because the else case is a catch-all that doesn't need a condition. So in the example of walking on the path, seeing the dog poop, you only need one condition even though there's 2 cases, right? You either walk around it, or you keep walking straight, right? There's just two cases, so one condition, checking whether there's dog poop, is all that you need. So think about the number of cases really, really specifically. Then also think about mutual exclusivity. In these cases that you're thinking of, are they mutually exclusive? Is it really true that only one of them can be run, one and only one? If so, you put them in one big selection block, one big selection thing with maybe else, ifs, and else, but it all goes together in sort of one conceptual block. So if not, though, if they're not mutually exclusive and you can have one and the other, they can layer on top of each other, then you want to think about separating them. They don't necessarily go together. You might need a separate if statement, or in the a sequential one, or a subsequent one. So you've got to think about these things. How many cases are they mutually exclusive? And that helps you figure out your logic. The other thing is, even though we're always tempted as coders to just start typing, writing programs, that's not always the best way to do these things. Write down some pseudocode. If you have a complicated problem, it's hard for your brain to get straight where things go, write it down in pseudocode. Send me the pseudocode. And once we get clear on that, once I know that you're thinking clearly about it, then you can move forward in code. I know you don't like that, no programming students do, but remember, programming is more about thinking than it is typing, and if you aren't thinking clearly, then you can spend an awful lot of time typing and moving things around, and you'll just get frustrated, and it will be no good, right? It will be to no avail, and you will have wasted a lot of time. Okay, so one more quick topic. Shorthand operators. There are many times when we do things, very, very common things like this. Customer count equals customer count plus 1. Again, remember, hide this from your eyes and just look over here. Customer count, we add 1 to customer count, then we store it back in the variable customer count. So customer count went up by 1. So there is a shorthand operator that you can use that looks like this. You can say plus equals. So if you say customer count plus equals 1, that's the same as saying customer count equals customer count plus 1. It's just so common that they made a special operator for it. This is a shorthand operator. There's also plus equals, minus equals, times equals, divided equals, and remainder equals, right? Because they are so common. So you have all these shorthand operators, which are very nice. In fact, there's another series that are even more useful in these counting scenarios, and that is you have increment and decrement operators. If you simply say line count plus plus, that's the same as saying line count plus equals 1, which is the same thing as saying line count equals line count plus 1. This just says tick it up by 1. So that's very, very common when you're doing counting, right? So this is a very common operator to use. You also have a minus minus operator. So if you said line count minus minus, that would tick it down by 1. It would decrement by 1. So hopefully that makes sense. So again, sort of little random topics, but helpful in sort of catching up and making sure that we have complete information and good tools at our fingertips. Now in the next video, we're getting into some pretty exciting territory, which is how can we now write some functions, write some code that really help us zero in on problems in our forms. And this is cool because it feels like a really interactive web page that really does some cool stuff. So stay tuned for that one. That's coming next. But thanks for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions.